we want to share with you all some images. Um, but yeah, thank you all for being here so much on this Monday afternoon. Thank you for taking the time out of the day to be here. And I'm so excited that today we are joined by two amazing artists whose art is grounded on regenerative communities and justice. Thank you so much, Jasmine Ko and Kiara Francesca for joining us. We're also excited to hear from you during this panel. And I'll start introducing Jasmine. Jasmine Ko, they is an artist based in Portland, Oregon. Her work explores the connection possible between nature, dreaming, transpersonal wisdom, and archetypes. Her paintings include fluid and colorful combinations of realistic figures and abstract forms, crisp lines contrasting soft textures, using mostly acrylics on canvases or wood panel. Music often inspires the process, and the artwork invites viewers to stay present long enough to hear the rhythm, beats, and melodies in the shapes, forms, and hues, to experience the movement in the stillness. Jasmine is currently working on her master's in climate change, development, and policy, and is passionate about ecological justice and regenerative whole system change. Living in a time faced with immense social and environmental challenges, we're asked to reflect on what we truly value. And for Jasmine, making art remains one of the most powerful acts of resilience. Thank you, Jasmine, once again for being here. And before presenting Kiara, I also wanted to acknowledge hashtag Creative Wildfire. Creative Wildfire is a collaborative call to collective action from frontline communities represented by Climate Justice Alliance, Movement Generation, and New Economy Coalition. Last November 9, these three organizations organized a showcase that featured amazing artists such as Aisha Shillingford, and I wanted to also share some of the art that they created. Amir Kahar, and yeah, it's Shift to Economy, some care of it. Jackie Fawn, they created Food for All, Mutual Aid for a Just Future, and we're also very thankful that all these streets organizations and the hashtag Creative Wildfire has allowed for many organizations to be able to share these messages that the artists have created, that it's built grounded on community resilience and regenerative communities overall, and just like offering this like different alternative to capitalism, and like that it is possible for us to be building communities of care and love and justice. And so I'm so excited to also welcome Kiara. I've seen there are before from this whole the whole Creative Wildfire, and so I'm really happy that they're joining us. And Kiara is a queer artist, writer, organizer, acupuncturist, immigrant, and former teen mom living with multiple disabilities. They are first-gen college graduate, having earned a 3-year master in acupuncture at the Pacific Ocean College of Oriental Medicine, and MA in Italian Studies from NYU in 2015, and an MFA in Painting and Drawings from the School of Art Institute of Chicago in 2012, where she was a Soros New American Fellow. Her clinical work is on mental health, trauma, CPTSD, and queer trans health. She is committed to building collaborative spaces for community care, centering collective health, and in and out of movements for justice, and using cultural work for structural change. Thank you once again so much for being here, both of you all. It's an honor. And also, oh yeah, and I also just wanted to share, sorry I wasn't able to showcase Kiara, some of Kiara's art, and it's beautiful. But yeah, we're gonna be starting this panel. Gabby, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Gabby. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm a network organizer. I'm going to be helping moderate the panel. So let's go ahead and get started. Just tell us a little bit more about yourselves, about your art, your inspirations for your art, like how you came to be, and just like the intersection between your art and like social justice and eco justice. I know, Jasmine, you really like, you know, use those elements of nature, and I almost see like a botanist, you know, inspiration there. And then Kiara, like I see like futuristic and like that artwork, and just both just really beautiful envisioning the future. So just go ahead and tell us a little bit more on that. Either or, whoever would like to go first.
All right, I can start. Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine. Thanks for having me. It took me a long time to connect my artwork with social, environmental justice work. I thought they were very separate for a long time, and wasn't really sure how painting something that looked beautiful to me was connected to the work that I thought needed to be done in the world. But it's actually just maybe in the past year or two that it's really starting to grow and develop, and really starting to appreciate the power of imagery and the power of visuals. And I think, you know, we're wired for visuals. You know, babies like see before they can speak. And I also think what makes us, you know, human, and what keeps us connected is art that we make. And it can be visual art, it can also be like culinary arts, healing arts, activism as art, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that if we want to design you know, a future that we don't know what it looks like yet, I think we need to tap into that kind of like art making imagination. And I'll just say one more thing that I was like really excited about, and also is related to this idea of like really appreciating pictures. I'm reading this book called Donut Economics by Kate Rayworth, and she talks about economics, like, but in like, she uses the shape of a donut, like two concentric circles, to show like the outer circle is like the ecological boundary that we don't want to surpass, and the inner circle is the social foundation of basic needs that we don't want to fall into. And what she's saying isn't exactly new, but like her using the visuals has been really powerful, and it's really an idea that's like spreading a lot, and it's really exciting.
Thanks for that, Jasmine. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to really thank Elvia, Jess, and Gabi for all the invisible work that I'm sure went into making today happen. And I'm just, you know, really honored to be here with you all today. So there's so many questions within that question. I think the one I heard the most is like, you know, how did we come to art, and how did we come to art as connected to movement work, if I understand that correctly, Gabi? And I feel like the answer I could give is probably different, you know, every day somebody asks me, because there's so many layers to that. I would say that like I grew up around, you know, political art, having grown up in Italy, where I went, you know, I was kind of like part of the squatting movement as a teenager. So like in the US it's not so common, but in Italy there's a bunch of squats, like places that, you know, people have taken over in cities, right? And they're like community centers pretty much. And they become like hubs for movement organizing. And a lot of times they have like zine libraries, right? To like break down political concepts. Because a lot of the people that hang out there, you know, they didn't go to college, right? Like it's like everyone sharing information with each other. And making art as a way to communicate like concepts that are complex, right? So I feel like art was like my way to learn about, you know, solidarity economics and mutual aid and, you know, socialism and, you know, like even like medicine, right? Like herbal medicine or DIY medicine, all that stuff. So I feel like I was exposed to this idea that you could use art to share knowledge between people outside of academia, you know, and that like was really, really powerful. And then I immigrated to the United States, and it took me like a long time to find my grounding here, and to be like, oh my God, you know, like the culture is so different. Everything I know is no longer, is no longer what I know, right? And I came to kind of politicize art through the Allied Media Conference, which is like a Detroit conference that happens every year that kind of brings together people working across, you know, economic justice, social justice, abolition, disability justice, kind of like movement work in general. And I think art has been a part of again, of communicating with each other and to the people outside of the institutions, right? And I'll stop there.
Yeah, certainly. You know, I find it's like such a roundabout way, Jasmine, how you naturally gravitate in Kiara, how you just, you know, that's how you begun, and then just now we're together in this moment, so it just kind of like synergizes. And I know, you know, in doing like social justice work in these movements, it can be hard at times to like visualize like the future and really just have that motivation to keep going. So what are your, like, some sources of inspiration? How do you tap into that continued imagination?
I mean, you know, nature has always inspired me, just before I started learning more about it, I guess in more through a climate science lens, but learning about it through that lens, I'm even more inspired by it, just the way that nature works with each other, different components work with each other in these really, like, I think well-designed ways that is regenerative, that is like circular, that is mutually beneficial. And so the more that I learned that, the more I'm like, whoa, it's like really cool. And it makes me want to, it just makes me appreciate it more. And working on, like, I've always been drawn to water and the ocean, but the more I learn about how it works and how it's like this incredible carbon sink, and how like coastal ecosystems are only cover like 2% of the world, but like account for like more of the carbon sequestration than terrestrial land does. And I think that there's a lot that can be learned just by observing. And yeah, I think my answer for what inspires me can go on for a long time, but that's definitely one of them. And let's just end there for time's sake.
Yeah, similarly, I think the answer could be really different depending on where I am. I mean, you know, I grew up in a big city, and that, you know, where nature just was scarce, and I now live in Chicago, which is a similar situation. So I feel, you know, like I feel like I've felt such a hunger for nature, and also living in the city, I think I had to, I don't know, yeah, like create a different relationship to nature, that is about observing how, you know, as humans, we are interacting with nature, and also what happens when folks don't have access to, you know, to green spaces, and how art can actually become not a substitute, but it can take on some of the role that nature has in terms of creating like space and awe and community and serenity and peace of mind, and even that kind of like meditative state, right? Like of folks doing art together, or like looking at art together. There's kind of something that happens to the brain that seems to, you know, take down our flight or fight response, right? Like when we are around art and look at art. So art, I think the inspiration sometimes, you know, it feels like it's like a way of coping with my environment is actually to seek out other art or to make art, to like find that peace for myself and for others. And then I would also say that, you know, lineage matters a lot. You know, I think that in times where I feel hopeless or uninspired, or like I'm never gonna make art again, you know, like my brain is just empty, or like my heart feels heavy, then I go back and look at like folks, you know, movement people, right, like through the generations, that have carried this work forward, and just feel a little less alone, you know, in the knowledge that this work has actually been done for centuries, right? And that each of us just has to carry like the little bit that we carry in our life, and then, you know, look back at what folks, what we have learned from the folks that came before us, and hopefully leave a little something for the folks that come after us. And that's like a totally long-winded answer to that question, so I'll stop.
Oh, yeah, just like that cycle of, you know, just offering between us and nature. I love houseplants. I'm sure everybody here loves plants. You know, at times where I'm feeling sad, I notice my like plants get like wilty or whatnot, and like, you know, or when I'm needing some strength, like just like that reciprocity that is present in our everyday lives with nature. It's very much there and very essential to, I think, the human experience. I think with that, like, do you, either of you have any experiences where you've drawn wisdom from nature, or do you have any like, um, you know, how could nature provide us with like wisdom going forward, or just like being able to reimagine our regenerative future?
Okay, I'll try to go first. I don't want to make you go first all the time, Jasmine. Oh man, I think comes to mind is like really, you know, about the relationship between people and nature, and how much there is to reconsider, right? Like I feel like it's not just us looking at nature as like an external force, but really think about how we are an integral part of it, and in what ways we have been, you know, abusing our relationship, um, and and really asking ourselves, like, what does it mean to be in right relationship to the environments around us? Because I think when we ask that, then we have to answer questions about economics. We have to answer questions about what we eat. You know, we have to answer questions about like how we treat our own bodies. We have to answer questions about public transportation, right? Like it answering like what would it look like to be in right relationship to nature, I think can be a compass in moving forward, period, right? And if we use that relationship as our center, I think we can really build something significantly different than we have so far, when we have put, you know, greed and accumulation, and not just greed and accumulation, but greed and accumulation for the few, right, as the center in how we've built our societies. Yeah, so I see our relationship to nature as a compass, I think. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Kiara shared around reorienting our relationship to nature. And I saw that Jess put in the chat that the fact that we are nature is an important reminder. And I think it's, you know, at first when you asked that, it just felt like a felt sense to me of like what I've learned from nature comes so much from just being in it, and also looking inward in myself. And you know, with urbanization and people living in cities and like surrounded by concrete and buildings, so there's been this disconnect, and the degradation and damage that we see comes from our desire to control and extract and exploit nature, but not just nature, but each other as well. And it just reminds me of this quote that I don't know who said it. It's from some Hopi someone who's connected to that tradition, that was the way that we treat each other is the way that we treat nature. And I would go as far to say that the way that we treat ourselves is the way that we treat each other, is the way that we treat nature. So I think that that healing happens at all levels. And yeah, just going back to the we are nature, I think that the more that we have that like in-person experience, for me, the part of my connection to the ocean was having this amazing opportunity to go snorkeling where my mom was born in the Philippines, and witnessing the coral life there was like, you know, life changing for me. And there's so much grief right now that I have over the coral reefs um, vanishing, and that's been a huge loss. Of like, I don't know if that's going to be something that we can save. It's really hard, and I don't know if I would have had that same grief if I didn't have that in-person experience of witnessing how, you know, magical they are.
Thank you for sharing, and just want to hold space for that. You know, just the eco grief that we have, and just grief in general, for a lot of relationships. I mean, your quote was just beautiful on, you know, how we treat each other and how we treat nature. And at the moment, it's, you know, poisoned. It's relationships, as a result of colonialism. And it can be very hard, you know, to just get out of that like hole essentially. But I mean, we have like, it's an appropriate response to the situation at hand. With that being said, I know, you know, capitalism has this thing where it like strips individuality and like takes away creativity and diversity, not just in like the soil, you know, and like the diversity of plants that exist, but also within our own minds, making it hard to like imagine, and just hard to express oneself. So how do you think we can begin to, you know, reimagine our relationship to art, and really begin to tap into that imagination, that is just so natural to us?
I think just maybe one aspect of that is that I've noticed in my practice in making art is just going along with mistakes. I make a lot of, I don't plan my art all the time, and sometimes it goes in a different direction, but I just kind of go with it every time. It reminds me of like, I don't know if anyone's ever watched Bob Ross, and he'll always say, what, like, it's not a mistake, it's a happy accident or something like that. And that feels quite true with the art that I make. And sometimes it ends up better in the end if I just willing to let go of the initial idea I had, if that makes sense. It's like, you know, let go of like grasping for what I think it should be, and being willing to have that conversation with the art or whatever it is you're creating, and have that kind of move with it and kind of be fluid with it. And sometimes when I think about making art, when I'm like really struggling and it feels really hard and it feels almost like, just feels like work, sometimes it kind of feels like this birthing process of like you're going through like this laborious thing of like, this isn't going the way I want. But I think just there's something about like sticking with it through the end too. So yeah, letting go of control, trusting in it.
I love that, Jasmine. Yes, I mean, I think letting go of mastery is such a big part of art making, you know, and like being okay with messing up. But that also makes me think about like, where does this idea of art and an artist as being like a hyper specialized person come from, right? Like it's connected to capitalism, it's connected to white supremacy, right? Like that our relationship to art is one where art becomes a job instead of starting from the point of like, we are all artists because we're alive and we are human. And that's just like inherent to being alive, right? And how would that change our relationship to art making if we own that and if we really like felt that? And two, like what comes in the way of people making art? And I think for me, my life, it was survival, right? Like if I was worried about rent, didn't have enough money for food, right? And was like in survival mode, it's really hard to have your brain in survival mode and have your brain making art at the same time, right? Like I think that to work to expand access to art, we have to really think about what it would be like for folks to not be worried with survival, right? And to expand quality of life, like accessible housing, like accessible food, healthcare to everybody, because that's really gonna be what opens up possibilities for everyone to have the mental space, the heart space, the brain space to make art, right?
Yeah, I'm always it's amazing when you get like base human needs met as such as housing, food, and just like getting out of that survival mode that unfortunately a lot of us have been forced under, and then also just going with the mentality of like happy accidents that Bob Ross taught us. But yeah, now like shifting gears a little bit, how Jasmine, you mentioned something along the lines early on, like before babies can like talk or they see first, so just like that visual like artistic aspect, and I'm sure there's other like babies also dance, and that's just like natural, and I know dance is also movement, something that's also an art form. So how can we connect with our inner I mean, I'm sure all of us had imagination at one point, as inner child, we imagine these like grand worlds. So how can we connect back to that? Additionally, if there's like an imaginative like game you played as a child or something, also share that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say that moments where I'm able to maybe tap into my imagination kind of go hand in hand with when I feel inspired or excited about something. Um, and through that inspiration and through that excitement to make something, like something inspires me to do something, um, then I feel like that's just feels like this ripe opportunity to tap into this imagination. And yeah, it can come through us in so many ways, through dreams, through a conversation that we have with someone, through again just being out in nature and observing. And I think yeah, something about what Kiara said about like capitalism and how that culture has kind of oppressed us in a way of maybe not being inhibited to let that inner child or that inner imagination explore and just see what happens. Doesn't have to be a finished product, doesn't have to be something you can sell. And I kind of struggled with that too, and that's why I'm not trying to run a business out of my art. And it kind of ruined it for me for a little bit, because I felt like I needed to like produce content, like, and it became became work. And I was like, okay, why am I making art? Like, why am I doing this? It's like, because I find it like beautiful. And at the same time, like art becomes more when it's shared. It becomes more when there's conversations that can be had around it. But I think, art is a basic human right, along with food and water. And I think it goes hand in hand with, like, as we are trying to break out of, this oppressive capitalist, like, produce and consume uh, culture. I think we can, also a part of that is just like breaking off these layers that are maybe trapping in our freedom to imagine something that's totally wild, totally different, and without judgment and without it needing to be like marketable or et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, this is a big question. You're kind of mentioning this idea of inner child, like makes me think about like when is the switch, right? Like when do we go from being a kid that is curious and that wants to make stuff to like something happens, right? Like something happens. And I think for all of us, what happens is different. Like for some of us, it's our parents, being shitty and harsh or judgmental. For some of it, it's like going to school and not being supported, right? For some of us, it's trauma, right? Or violence. I mean, I think fear, and at some point, like the inner dialogue we have changes. I've tried to really pay attention to like, how am I talking to myself in my head at the times where things don't work? If I sit down and I'm like, I have this idea and I want to make it happen. And then the judge in my brain turns on, right? And it's like, you're not good enough, or you don't know what you're doing, or this looks like shit, right? And then it completely kills it. Then it's like, I don't want to do it. And I wonder, right, like, who are those voices? Who have been the people in my life, the systems in my life that have instilled those voices that I know I was not born with, right? And I think it's a retraining of the way we talk to ourselves that allows us to reconnect to the imagination, right? And to be able for our inner voice to be gentle, to be kind, to be generous, to leave space for messing up, to like leave space for experimentation, to have time, right? To not be like, okay, I have an hour to finish this one thing that I'm doing, and if I don't finish it in this hour, it's a failure, right? Like, one of the ways to engage in social media that I think has been both tricky for me and also that I've had to really be firm with is that things will happen on their own time. And like, if I make one thing a month, that's great. If I make one thing every 2 months, that's fine, right? And I think that's also part of disability justice, right? Like, it's like honoring the fact that our bodies, our minds, our hearts are not a machine, right? And that's part of the resistance, is to honor capacity, as we move through the world, especially as artists and as creative people.
Yes, slow living as like a new movement, just rejecting the urgency that capitalism puts us under. And I know through art, those like voices and all that trauma that we carry, like that in itself can be a source of like inspiration and produce artwork, and just have that trauma live elsewhere that's not in our nervous systems. But once we do heal our inner child, this goes on to our next question, but imagining, if you had all of your basic needs met, if your inner child was fully healed, like, and you're able to work collaboratively with community, establishing communities of care, what does it feel like as an art, like from your artistic like minds, what does it feel like, what does it look like? Yeah.
I think it cut out of, oh, sorry. I think it cut out a bit, but I think your question was if all the needs were met, inner child was healed, what do you imagine that would feel like, or what would the economy feel like? Is that the question?
Economy or world.
Cool. Yeah, I've been looking a lot into post-growth economics, degrowth economics, and it goes hand in hand with what we were talking about slowing down. And we've been working on a new piece that says the revolution will be relaxing. And it's, we've heard the phrase of like rest is radical, although it shouldn't be, normalizing naps, which is great. I love naps. And yeah, how can we, in an equitable way and in a way that doesn't, leave behind, as it usually does, like for those that are most vulnerable, how can we equitably downscale production and consumption, and just let go of like GDP and let go of infinite economic growth at the cost of like our livelihoods, at the cost of the environment. And I imagine that what it might look like, what our world might look like, what our economy might look like, would look like being able to aspire for everyone to have their needs met. Basic income, reduce working hours. Like we don't need to work 40 hours a week. Like there's more people in this world, and there's no need to like keep producing. We're kind of on this like cog of like trying to like the only way, like how we're measuring our progress is through GDP. And I think we need to just rewrite our narrative around what does progress mean, and can we have economies that are based on like well-being and different metrics, multi-dimensional metrics. And I think that there's a lot of emerging ideas that are already trying to propose alternative ways of doing things, and it's kind of just getting it's like continuing to do that and continuing to connect with people. And the system is a really big and slow changing machine, and it needs to happen on a global scale, but also there's a lot that we can do locally too. And I think it's going to require like shifting our mental models and the way that we see ourselves like in this world. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited for an economy that will allow for more rest, that where we aren't like, trying to fit everything in on the weekends, and just like, yeah, that just prioritizes well-being.
All right, I'll give it a try. It's such a big question. I feel like I try to do this once every couple of weeks, where I try to like close my eyes and like really feel what this is gonna, what it could be like to have a world without unnecessary suffering, like what it would feel like in my body, and to like step by step imagine what would it mean to move away from where we're at towards a place where again, we cannot help heartbreak, and we cannot help sickness, right? Or pain. That's gonna happen, but there's so much we can do to minimize unnecessary suffering, and the amount of inequality that we are experiencing now, and part of me just imagines a place where survival is not a struggle. And that could look like a radical redistribution of resources. It can look like reparations. It can look like defunding the carceral system, right? It can look like having affordable food, affordable housing, all of that. And then I also, really realize that on a global scale, or even in a country like the United States, where there's like so many different realities, we don't know what it's going to look like, and that's okay. And that part of that is, engaging in what Mariame Kaba, she's a Chicago abolitionist, she calls the million experiments, right? That all of us are engaging in a million experiments, and we don't know what's the next step. But the importance of staying in the struggle is that we keep engaging in a million experiments, and what that might look like in different places, will be different, and that the solutions many times are local, and the people that are most affected are the ones that have the knowledge and the wisdom that might get us there. And I also really think that there's no utopia, right? Like that in the whole history of humanity, we're never striving for perfection. There's no perfection. And that what we are doing is trying to stay engaged in a principled struggle towards a world where there's the least amount of suffering possible, right? And humbly holding that we don't know what that's gonna look like, and that's okay. That's my best answer for the night.
Beautiful. I can't imagine, like, well, I can just like what an economy or world where rest is prioritized, and not working to survive. And just like the million experiments kind of takes me to, art where we're constantly trying, we're constantly practicing and like messing up and making art. But these million experiments could be seen as happy accidents, that Bob Ross shows us with. But yeah, so I'm gonna, before I take it off to just audience questions and just free dialogue, I want to know if you two are working on any projects that you would love to share with the group.
The question is, are you working on any projects? And also, if anybody has questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to make space for you to share any projects or any like exciting happenings. If not, that's totally fine. It's like when it comes, and that's what nature shows us. And then go into audience questions.
Awesome. I will say I'm like scared to even talk about it, but I've finished a freaking book and it took 7 years. So I'm just gonna tell you all, it's happening. It's happening. And actually, the conversation we had tonight, like I feel like I was hungry for a story that connected lived experience and systemic dynamics, right? And also a book that talked about like, again, like how we all carry like our stories with our particular intersections of all sorts of stuff, right? Of both oppression and privilege. And also that, it's a fractal, like our lives are fractals, right? And fractals are these things that repeat at the macro and macro system, right? So I wanted to take like what I know, like from my life, and connect it to like systems of resistance and systems of oppression, and maybe what a path forward should look like. And it took me so long because I'm a single parent and I had to wait for my kids to go to college to be able to start writing. So it took 7 years, but it's pretty much done. My kids are reading it right now, and once they give me the seal of approval that they are down with what I wrote, I'm gonna share it with y'all. So that's what I've been working on.
That's amazing. Congrats on the book, Yara. You can imagine that was a lot to put into that. So, yay. I'm always working on like 5 different things at once, but one that I was working on this afternoon while I surprisingly had time to, was in line with what we were talking about on, an economic system that allows for rest and work-life balance, and it's not done, but it looks like this so far. I don't know if you could see it, but don't usually show things that are not complete. But I it's funny with this one, like I told myself that I'm not going to work on it, paint it, when I feel this pressure because I want to like complete something. So it's been taking a while. I'm like, I'm only gonna work on it when it's from a place of like feeling relaxed. So it's kind of been an interesting experiment for me to do that. But I'm in school right now, and I just finished a paper on degrowth, and it's connected with this piece. So I just finished that paper over the weekend, and I'm excited to like connect my academic writing with like my paintings too.
Awesome, awesome. How exciting. Thank you so much for sharing your artwork. I feel like just so honored to be able to see like a preview of it. But yeah, I do want to be respectful of your two's time. I'm not sure if you have time to stay for one or two audience questions. If not, that's totally fine. Yeah.
It looks like there's a question for Jasmine from Bonnie. It says, you mentioned music that you listen to while you work. Can you share what some of the music pieces might be?
That's hard. I listen to a lot of music, a lot of different genres and artists, and it's like constant. I wish I had like an artist to share. Actually, someone put in the chat, Lido Pimiento, and I really like that artist too. So there's one I have listened to them recently. I love listening to music in other languages. Sometimes, lyrics can kind of get in the way. So I do listen to a lot of music that are either instrumentals or in different languages.
Alrighty. Well, if we don't have any questions, thank you so much, Jasmine and Kiara, for joining us and just, bringing us into this world of art and reimagination and just, really putting us in the headspace to transition into our workshop. Yeah, just thank you so much for your time and wisdom.
Thank you so much, you all. Thank you so much for making space and time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Appreciate all the organization.
Sorry, the question before you hop off. I just want to hear your ideas for the, touching the imagination of more people into communities. I'm thinking about our week of action in the fall and things we've talked like stickers, staying in murals, but any ideas for bringing your art into some of the communities where transition groups are? If you have time for that.
The internet cut off a little, but I think you asked about ideas to bring art directly to communities. Is that the question? Yeah.
Yeah, and particularly like during the week of action they're having in October around Indigenous Peoples Day and Cooperative Month. And I'm sorry, my internet is bad.
It's all right. I just want to make sure I understood. I mean, I can tell you kind of what I've done in the past. You know, I always try to think about like intergenerational stuff and different ages. I've made like a coloring book. You know, I've made art and then made it into a coloring book for the kids and for the adults that wanna do that. And then just distributed it for free. Zines have been like another good way to get the word out, and also distributing posters, especially again, you know, having like a strong connection to folks in your neighborhood, right? Like in your city, like grassroots organizing, and then distributing stuff that way has been very helpful. I feel like, you know, this might just be me, but I feel like folks are feeling pretty burned out on social media stuff because we're all been on it for 2 straight years, right? So I feel like the more we can do IRL, like something we can hold, you know, that feels kind of where the like temperature is at right now, you know. Yeah, so that's my answer to that.
Oh, that's funny. I was just going to mention theater and plays and it got put in the chat, but it's not something I have done, but I've like heard of and seen like social theater and how those can be really powerful to pick up different roles, different elements of different issues, and bringing humor into it, and laughter can be really powerful. This is something that came to my mind.
I can't wait to see just posters of art, like radically imagining the future, just put up like randomly on like a light post or something. But yeah, again, thank you so much, Jasmine and Kiara, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you both. Have a wonderful evening. And I think we have a lot here to help fuel our next portion of the workshop. So if folks are ready for that, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a PowerPoint to describe the activity we'll be doing in our breakout rooms. Jasmine and Kiara, you're welcome to stay as long as you are able to. And again, deep appreciation for all that you do to help us engage our imagination. Because looking through, I know, yeah, I can feel burnt out on social media, and I can't tell you how grateful I am sometimes to see certain imagery come across my feed, or at least see snapshots of beautiful work that people are doing in community. So thank you for those gifts. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint to just, so we can go over the activity. We're going to get our creative juices flowing. Okay. Okay. And if everyone can see my screen, so we're going to go ahead and go into breakout groups. I'm thinking groups of 3 to 4. And for the first 10 minutes, we're going to spend 45 minutes in our breakout rooms. First 10 minutes are going to be spent doing some reflecting and journaling. We have 3 guiding questions. Feel free to take these or leave these. Maybe there's some insights that you want to reflect on in these 10 minutes, but you'll be doing that with your breakout group. So some silent space, you can chat with each other if that's what the group needs. But the 3 guiding questions to go through if you're needing that support would be, how can nature provide us with the wisdom to reimagine and rebuild our world, which came up during the panel. So this is an invitation for you to reflect on that. How can we connect to our inner child's imagination? What is the most imaginative game you played as a child? And then again, that question of imagining where all of our basic needs are met, right? All of those conditions of healing, of safety and support are met. What does the economy look like and feel like on a daily basis? So let's say you're waking up for quote unquote work. What does your day look like in that kind of a world? So that's maybe it's a short story or a poem that comes through, but take 10 minutes. And then after that, y'all are gonna open up a bit more. I'm gonna drop a link to this PowerPoint. Everyone will have editing privileges, and each group is gonna have space on these different slides to construct a collective representation or image. And again, it could include text, song lyrics, a link to a song if we want to get our collaborative playlist going. This is just going to be an opportunity for a group to have kind of a whiteboard space where you can put together different imagery and words that represent home. And this idea of Regeneration Nation, which has been the campaign that we will be launching this week of action under, think about what Regeneration Nation looks like and feels like. And feel free to localize or regionalize what that experience is and have good conversation with your group to represent. And then we'll have some space when we come back to the big group to share out. You're more than welcome to perform something if you're feeling really inspired, or just share kind of what came up for you in that process. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll make sure everyone has a link to the PowerPoint with all of the instructions and space to put digital images, again, lyrics, whatever you want to express yourself with. There are no rules in that regard. So let me put the link in the chat. There's the link for everyone. I'm going to go ahead and put everyone into breakout groups. And if we don't have any questions, so if anyone has questions, this is your opportunity. I'm taking a look. I don't see any. Okay, so let's do breakout rooms. Let's do groups of 4. Break rooms. All right.
Not us in the same break.
In our reach without oops.
Welcome back. I hope that was fun, or you all got some creative juices flowing. I think for these next 15 minutes, we're going to share back if anything really juicy or interesting came up in your groups. Also, any reflections, and I'm going to just quickly ask folks to mute really briefly, and then we can go back off of mute. Yeah, just if there are any reflections that came up from sorry, y'all, just the echo can be really distracting. So just sharing back, if there's anything that came up during the panel that you all were talking about as a group, would love to see if any groups would like to share out whatever imagery came through. And these are works in progress. I'll make sure you all have the links if you want to continue to play with them or iterate on anything that you all came up with. So floor is open. Anyone would like to share? I really love awkward silences. And I'm being honest. I think sometimes we're like, oh no, I have to fill up the space. And I'm doing that right now. I'm being self-aware, but
I think maybe the raised hands don't always show, so I'll just jump in. We talked some about biomimicry and well, we did talk about imagination, about how nature's already done it. We just need to pay attention. And trees talking to each other that we didn't know before.
I love that.
I think I pulled out a quote from Emergent Strategy authors Adrienne Marie Brown, but there's a part in the book where they put grounding in nature, and it says starlings commemoration consists of a flock moving in sync with one another, engaging in clear and consistent communication, and exhibiting collective leadership and deep trust. Every individual bird focuses attention on their 7 closest neighbors and thus manage a larger flock cohesiveness and synchronicity, at times upward of 1,000,000 birds, by Sarah Pickett. And I mean, I feel like that's really beautiful. And there's like a lot in this book in terms of like seeing, like looking into nature and just getting inspiration from them, because yeah, like they already know like the systems that they have, like they figured this out for so much time in our evolutionary time. So yeah, I think it's time we start paying attention and starting to analyze all of our human constructs that people have freaking made traditions and stuff like that. I feel like there was another, I remember Cole, I remember the whole specific that just talked about like how traditions, just pass down sometimes, but like we need to sometimes have deeper like analysis of like, does this tradition serves any like positive impacts, or like why are we still doing this, or if like just questioning that. Um but yeah, that's what we some of well I guess that's what I share in my group. Um
Of that. And I want to give a shout out to group number 4. Who was in group number 4? I'm seeing some really beautiful imagery put there. Yeah, go ahead, Whitney. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Well, Nikki and Sandy contributed a lot of that, but we were kind of covering a range of things. Also, I think biomimicry came up, but thinking about how nature, what it would look like for nature to be more integrated into our homes, our diets, what we wear, and the ways that we relate to one another, and the importance of like celebration and joy and ease and playfulness. As well as cooperative economies and interdependent, like collaborative living situations. And yeah, I'll let the other 2 contribute as well, because they said beautiful things.
So I'm specifically interested in biomimicry when it comes to economics. My entire life is based on that. And so for me, it was about making sure that everything comes from a place of the acknowledgement of abundance, and that scarcity is an artificial mind virus that actually is unfortunately programmed into us because we veered so far away from our ancestors and all of our shared elements. It doesn't matter where we originated from on the planet. All of our ancestors had gift economies. All of our ancestors' economies were circular. All of their economies were based on abundance, not scarcity, to the extent of even migration was just following the abundance. It wasn't about leaving scarcity. It was about following abundance. And so I think that if we look at things like the Buy Nothing Project, and if any of you are in your local Buy Nothing group, I don't know how busy yours are. Mine is freaking thriving. And we're doing amazing things for each other beyond the items that we're giving and receiving. And I really think that Buy Nothing is a perfect example of how hyper-local interconnectivity can create abundance for all and true equity and diversity in everything. Yeah.
Amen. I love that. This theme of biomimicry, nature has figured it out. How do we position ourselves to better listen and integrate these lessons that are living right in front of our eyes? Anyone else like to share? And I apologize if I can't see your hand, just go ahead, jump in. Sandy, there you go.
Yeah, I mentioned how our bodies have lots of other species in them. They're pretty small, like microscopic, some of them. but our intestines and so on. So each of us, we consider ourselves an individual, but we're actually a team. We've got lots of other species helping us out.
Absolutely. We are interdependent. Isn't it that more of our DNA is like from bacteria and viruses than technically human DNA? Or maybe I'm
It is. It
right?
is.
I think so.
And our entire mental health, we now know, relies on our gut health, which has its own biome of bacteria and probiotic things and everything. I wanted to say one more thing. I'm so sorry about the biomimicry part. Matriarchal leadership. There is no patriarchal leadership in nature, period. It does not exist. It is completely artificial and came about upon the canonization of the Bible by Constantine, who was the worst person that's ever lived on this planet. So anyway, just saying matriarchal leadership has to be incorporated into anything regenerative moving forward. And I need like everybody to hear that.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you, sister. Amen.
Yeah.
Bonnie, I see your hand up if you want to share.
Sure. So the fact that we do have abundance and actually sometimes too much of stuff came up in our group too. That it's just not shared, and so I guess that feeling of when people feel empty, that is probably the basic part of this way. That if in our we have an economy where people feel empty, when there's abundance around us, then there's things aren't flowing. It's in nature there's some more distribution, and we sometimes have this more linear process that forgets that process of distribution. And so there was mention of a town center. If we could have a town center to where everybody had a place to be, and also that all the responsibility isn't on one person's shoulder or just a few shoulders for whatever it is, saving the world or whatever needs to be done. So those are some of the things.
Love that, Bonnie.
I had one idea that I mentioned in the group and just imagining things like, I don't know, but just this like economy of exchange and abundance. But like those like I'm in the city. I'm in LA on Tong the Land, and there's like these parkways. So it's like a grass patch between the road and the sidewalk, and oftentimes it's just grass, and like I hate grass. It's so like not necessary. But envisioning like a regenerative future, like it would be so beautiful to see that just be like patches of like a garden or like on your block, like vegetables and fruit. And then if you don't like have a certain herb or something, you go down to like the next block or two to your neighbor, exchange it. Maybe like one block could be like a medicinal block. And I see that can be like, I don't know, I envision that happening like very soon.
Some awesome ideas coming through, and just wanting to make a note to the group, if we're finding ourselves in a good flow with ideas and sharing, we're going to keep the room open a little past 7 if folks are wanting to do that and have some more conversation space. But again, the floor is open. This is your space. Ever you'd like to share with the group.
I want to say thank you all for coming to this event. It was really, awesome. I always love towards the end when we have this conversation. It's really good to hear from you all. And I guess like before we wrap things up, we did want to make a shout out to our crowdfunding campaign that we launched recently. And we're crowdfunding for the week of action, and that will take place in the fall. And you'll be supporting a lot of like regenerative and just like projects that are led by communities. And I guess once that crowdfunding reaches the $10,000, we're gonna be opening applications for a lot of communities worldwide to apply for mini grants, so that they could like work on a project during the week of action. And we're hoping that the week of action could be sort of like a catalyst for like more of a like regenerative like media attention, like because a lot of like what the media chooses to like uplift is definitely just very either climate doom or just like not helpful things at all. And I think like we need to make sure that people know out there that like have another better world is possible by working together and building that community. So we definitely want to help support groups launch their projects or work on the projects. And we're also going to be having a student ambassador program, and we will be like supporting a lot of youths in the different UC system. For example, like the California has University of California schools, universities, and like Jess, Gabby and I, we all went to UCSB. But so we were thinking of like how can we, build those connections that we already made in our UC systems, and we also know like different people from the other campuses, and just kind of like working together to start some kind of transition initiative, youth, and like also have workshops and help them like work on projects on their campuses, because there's a lot of like just a lot of opportunity to create something there. Like a lot of like we recently graduated, so I think like we have a lot of ideas of just like how can we support a lot of the youths to work on these projects, especially like because the UC system will not fund their revolution. They will not, fund the groups to actually create that meaningful change within their campuses. So I think we need to have like us or transition or just another group, to come and like be able to support to actually have that change that's super needed and so possible at these university levels. And the UC system, has a lot of economic, like it literally employs so many people in the California state. And if we were to change how they're treated and how people are just in general, like how the UC makes rules and stuff like that, then I think we could definitely have a huge impact in just the United States as well, since the California economy is the biggest. So yeah, if y'all, I just went on the whole rant about the UC system, but yeah, like we definitely would appreciate anyone to donate. Wait, what? Yeah, but we definitely appreciate any donations, and if you all donate, you will all be entered into a raffle to win a basket that contains a lot of beautiful art, especially art from Kiara and Jasmine today. We're gonna have some prints, we're gonna have some books, amazing books as well. So I don't know if someone has posted the link, but I'll post the link down here. But yeah, thank you everyone. Hope you all have good luck on winning the basket with any donations. All right. Well,
Thank you for that plug, Elvia. And just wanting to, again, I don't know, Whitney, if I saw you trying to unmute and share something, if you wanted some space before we go out, or also Edwin, I'm not sure if you wanted to share something as well. No. Okay. All righty. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay,
Thanks
bye
for
all.
creating this space.
Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful evening.
You too.
Okay,
Bye.
Thank you.